Yeah. So I would talk in English. Is there anybody who doesn't understand English? Is it okay? If there's anything, just ask me and I will try to translate it. So in this talk, I will introduce tools and methods we developed for identifying and activating engagement in urban communities. And I have two examples. One is more like a low-tech mapping tool that I developed with my colleagues. And a second example will be interactive urban interventions. So why engagement in this diagnostic, de l'engagement, diagnostic, why engagement? So I'm interested in identifying existing dynamics. And so if you look at the city or the urban space or the territory in general, it's always like an assemblage between people and infrastructure. You know, and you could argue, okay, there's also the political and everything. But what I want to do in my work is to step out of this typical service approach in which the government is expected to solve all the problems. So because this was inspired by a visit that I had that I did in Porto, and we went with students. We went to some very poor area, and we saw that the government was actually not really active. And so like, how can you make these communities more resilient, and which tools can you give communities to become more empowered? And so what do we do when the government fails? To identify issues or in their diagnosis. What can citizens do if all these specialist urbanists come into the space and fail to identify something? What if something does not fit the matrix? They're really pretty diagnostic matrix. What if they fail to identify something? So what should you do? What can a citizen do? And so my work is about creating tools for these people. So a bit of a disclaimer and démenti. I don't see my work as replacing existing approaches, but more to complement them. And so there's the typical, urbanistic approach of identifying and mapping, and so I think that my work is more about complementing. And a weakness of looking at looking at engagement is, of course, that not every citizen is engaged. So not every citizen has the time to engage in participatory processes, and therefore might not be represented. But so it's up to us to really look really closely to how we can go to people, meet them, and make sure that our tools are actually pretty representative. So a very inspiring thing from the preparatory work was this question of faut-il conserver la métaphore médicale? And so when you're up there as a specialist in your helicopter and you look at the city and you see, okay, let's identify some issues. Which eyes do you do this? Which intention? And how deep are you going? There's 12 million people living in the Paris metro area. How do you diagnose this? How deep do you go? You could say that actually there's 12 million problems, because how personal do you go? There's 12 million problems. Can you actually diagnose all of this? And there's this thing that I find really interesting, the question of the wicked problem. The city, the urban environment as a wicked problem. Actually, a thing where wicked problem is a system, is a problem where you act, and by acting it already changed. It's in continuous evolution, and every diagnosis is actually temporal. You cannot really fully grasp. Can we diagnose something wicked? Can we find the true problem actually in all this system? And so it's an internal change. Nothing is permanent, and if you act in it, it's already changed. And so it's a bit frightening actually. So like, it's you don't know what you're handling actually. It's like this huge beast that you cannot really grasp or do anything. And so my in the question of, should we conserve, should we use the medical metaphor, I don't believe in a purely medical vision in terms of finding solutions for cures. I believe more in a vision in which people should find their own ways out of situations. And I don't mean with that to leave people in their own issues or terms. I often people don't have the ability to find their ways out, and so I think they would need some help to identify their dreams and ambitions with their areas. So in my practice, I never use the diagnosis as, or the most interesting. I did this for some. The truth is, I did use diagnosis purely as a diagnosis for some governments in mapping exercises, but I never found them really interesting, and I never found that the things that came out were interesting. And I always felt like, what am I actually? Why should I? Because governments, they are looking for solutions, they are looking for answers for problems. And based on participatory mapping tools, for instance, I never felt that I had, the right to say, well, this is the exact solution for what you want. But yeah, I always found it more interesting if I could engage people more in doing actions, in changing some things themselves that they themselves actually were part of in this creation process. So it's often mostly about small shifts, creating awareness, and sometimes larger shifts that lead to actions. And an interesting concept that I find is like this idea of self-practice, about you yourself doing your own medical examination and looking at your environment, and not like waiting for others to do this for you. And the autopratique and the auto-observation. And a related concept, I didn't hear this yet, about like the smart city and what is a smart city. What is a smart city actually? And the diagnosis in the digital age has not really been got into in this discussion, I think, so far. So a smart, and in this idea of what is a smart city, I truly believe in the idea of the smart citizen, and in the sense like a citizen who is somebody who has a holistic vision on the city and is trying to change some things. And it's not only about infrastructure or spatial design. It's not only about tackling issues such as the dirty street or a noise pollution or something. It's also about making a space more lively. It's about falling in love. It's about partying. It's about all these kind of things that really make a city a city. And this smart citizen actually understands that he or she has a role in all this, that they are actors, and that they can take things in their own hands, and that they can act. And so I am proponent for a more hybrid model of governance, in which actually government and city are more like intertwined, and everybody does its part, and there's more like a mixture of analysis and proposals, and there is because citizens already do some things, they see opportunities, they do their own diagnosis of the space, and they do make, for instance, pop-ups, or they say, well, I want a more lively social space, and they create an urban garden, or they think of the city as something where more ecology is important. The problem is a bit that these citizen actions are sometimes one-offs. They are temporal. They are not like permanent things. At the same time, the government also does a lot of things to go towards the citizens, something like open data, apps, and all this kind of new technologies in which they want to open up their governments, and like, on what are they spending money, what are the areas actually that are problematic, etc., etc. So my thing is, my work is about tools for community self-transformation, and for identifying an environment of engagement. And an interesting aspect of that is like the idea of infrastructuring by like Di Salvo, Dantec, and Een. And they see like they're from the participatory design action research, and they see the product design focused on. Often, you know, they say like participatory action research should not only look at present conditions, but also more at looking at future design and create a fertile ground to sustain community of participants. So now 2 projects that we did. One is Muppets. It is about actually creating a new language, a boundary object, and it was like inspired by workshops like this, in which there's a few people that are like theoretical, and then there's a few people who are designers, and they speak another language, and they have there's power games happening, and so we designed Muppet as like a physical way and approach to actually lower these barriers, to start to create a boundary object, creating a new language that everyone had to adhere to, and so they were on the same level. It often starts with like a walk through an area to identify opportunities and issues, and then there is a system which has a kind of a background map and stickers, and I will just show you a few of these of the principles of this mapping kit. It was always like to identify opportunities, and that after the Muppet kit, a dynamic was created between the participants, and it really emerged that some actions moved out of this. So there's always like this idea of creating engagement through the practice itself. So a few principles are like not having too many participants, not to create this, to lower the barrier for participation. There is like a scenario, a timed scenario with a moderator, and every participant has its own sticker sheets. Then there is the action of placing elements on the map, the stickers on the map based on the scenario. And yeah, it's a system, you can check it out online, but there is a kind of a structure in how we there's a method in how we structured issues and opportunities. Like there's people stickers, there's sting stickers. There's also keyword stickers, relation stickers, and then the idea, and that is actually one of the most interesting elements of Muppet, the idea of risk and of risk taking. Actually, the idea with participation and with opening up the diagnosis to a wide range of participants, not only staying with the experts or the specialists, because I actually don't like the word expert, because I think every citizen who lives for a while in the city is actually an expert in his place. It's, there's specialists are the architects and people who sometimes think they're experts, but sometimes they're not experts in that particular space. They're specialists. So when you open up actually your processes to the local experts, the citizen, then you're actually doing a kind of a risky business, and because there might be a lot of things that are happening, and so these risk stickers actually try to create friction in these processes by, for instance, placing a bomb on the map. What does it mean to place a bomb on a map? A bomb might, why do you place a bomb on the map? It's not to physically really destroy something, but it might be a way to say, well, I don't agree what this architect is proposing here, and these are the reasons. So by asking participants to place a bomb on the map, they force themselves to think critically on a certain element. So. And also like the idea of the blank sticker, and the idea that you cannot, that you should have like some openness in your processes. So some concept and finding, trying to flatten the power structures through creating new languages and rules, be open but prepared, generating creative dynamics and going beyond the diagnosis, going beyond the negative, and yeah, not staying in a negative cycle, but trying to get this positive dynamic. And then something that we really saw, I work a lot with governments and identifying, but first doing a work with, for instance, a local government with all the specialists is really helpful to prepare the ground and identify the area in which citizen participation can occur. So if you ask everything from the citizens, they get like tired after a while. But if you already say, well, politically there is a wish to do certain things, then it's interesting to focus on that with the citizen. Well, I quickly go to another one. I think there's opportunities for digital diagnosis. These days there are citizen science tools, there are sensors, so we can actually, not everything, but we can measure things. I think this has not been talked about. And so, yeah, there is one project that is more of a digital physical tool, joining the digital with the physical. There is this project that we developed. It's called Quand les oiseaux, and it's about like a small bird, interactive bird that is we hung at 4 facades at groups of citizens actually. And these are connected whistling sparrows that light up when you whistle in the vicinity. Ça réagit à des sifflements. Il y a un microphone là-dedans. Et quand on siffle, cet petit moineau s'éclaire et ça donne des points à un website online. Et c'est en fait, the thing is, it was activating neighborhood organizations, the schools, and motivated citizens. It was a 4-week game, and actually there were 2 winning conditions. Firstly, the amount of whistles, but also the activities that were organized by the teams, by the 4 teams. So we wanted to stimulate self-action, creation of social networks, and also identifying urban issues. So using a game actually as a kind of a form of diagnosis. Because this set like as a kind of a structure, a dialogic process between the government, local government, and the citizen, in which there are possibilities to talk to each other in a certain structured way and with a certain budget. And important in this is that the approach is ludic, yeah? So that it's about more of a play, gameful thing. Actually, a lot of whistles were detected, a total of 190,000 in 4 weeks, up to 26,000 for a specific week. But that was not a real success. The real success was the appropriation that happened, and so all the kind of activities that the citizen created themselves, from parties to theater things, to wishing balloons, to all kind of things. And this is 2 things that I want to point to. There was this new bench that was installed through a collaboration with citizens and the government. So the citizen, through this dialogue, identified, okay, this is what we need. We need a bench here, and then the government installed this, and this was facilitated through doing this project together with the citizen. Another thing was that most of the appropriations were low-tech, but there was one case in which it was there was an engineer that actually adapted our system to something more technological by making the sparrow, which normally was fixed, was actually made mobile on a cart. So this, for me, as an interaction designer working on smart cities, inspires me to say, well, we should actually, in this idea of the hybrid model of governments, we should create new civic tools that engage citizens beyond the problem-centric, tap in the ludic, the aesthetic, strengthen local networks, and enable smart collaborations between citizen and governments. and approach, and I think this is very important, approach citizens in their own zones, areas, not expect people to come to a diagnostic evening from 6 till 9 in the evening where nobody comes, only the 5 persons that are actually already super engaged, but really go to the squares, to the streets, and meet people there. And not think that an online platform in which people can give comments or something on an app will solve or identify all the issues and make a good, interesting diagnostic. So how I think this needs to be developed through co-creation and infrastructuring, and also the idea of the meta design I like a lot. The idea that you actually design as, you design tools in a way, things that are adaptable, in which you seed something, you seed a design to a community and they adapt it themselves for their local needs. I think this solves a bit of part of the wickedness of the urban space, when people can really hyper-locally start adapting things and kind of circumvents the typical idea of you first have to identify the problem and then we will find a solution, and see it more as iterations and a cycle and this dynamic thing. Yeah. Well, that was kind of it.
Merci pour ta présentation. Moi, j'ai une question par rapport à... Tu parles de community, comme... en fait, moi, ce que je comprends comme community, c'est des gens qui se rassemblent autour d'une envie ou une idée qu'ils ont en commun pour pouvoir la porter, du style faire un jardin, je sais pas, partager. Et est-ce que ça va pas... Enfin, comment est-ce que tu peux changer aussi d'échelle? Parce que la communauté, là, elle va définir une certaine échelle. Et elle va définir des enjeux propres à cette échelle-là. Et dans l'urbanisme, chaque chose qu'on fait, elle a un impact à différentes échelles. Comment est-ce que tu dépasses... Enfin, ce serait possible avec ce que vous faites de traverser ces échelles-là. Et j'avais une remarque peut-être par rapport au diagnostic d'après une carte avec les petits bonhommes cubes autour là, de cette slide. Moi, ça m'a semblé que là, on est dans un langage d'urbaniste, de se dire on travaille sur une grande carte, et que du coup, il n'y a pas tout le monde qui arrive à imaginer le lien entre la carte et la réalité. Et aussi, les choses qui vont être posées sur cette carte, elles vont constituer après une liste de choses qui vont être prises en compte comme voilà ce que les gens ont dit. Et des fois, les gens, ils ont dit ça, mais en fait, le lendemain, ils auraient dit autre chose. Et aussi, des fois, ils n'arrivent pas forcément à savoir si c'est vraiment un problème, qu'ici, il y a du bruit, ou est-ce que c'est finalement pas tellement gênant. Donc, une fois qu'on a identifié les problèmes, on ne sait pas forcément s'il faut vouloir les solutionner ceux-là, ou alors pas, ou finalement, c'est pas tellement important. Et je pense par exemple à une démarche participative à Lausanne, où il y a plein de gens qui ont dit oui, on aimerait bien qu'il y ait un marché. Et en fait, il y a déjà un marché, mais personne n'y va. Et c'est plutôt, on aimerait bien l'image de se dire j'habite dans un lieu où il y a une buvette, un marché, mais sans... c'est plutôt des paroles en l'air un peu. C'est pas forcément quelque chose qui vraiment un diagnostic, je trouve. Donc, ouais, est-ce que tu arrives à voir comment dépasser ces limites-là dans ce que tu proposes, et comment est-ce que tu peux avoir un impact du coup plus grand que le banc, par exemple, de dire ok, on a fait tout ça, on a un nouveau banc, genre ok, mais enfin... Ouais.
Bien sûr. Et l'exemple de banc est très minimal et petit, et c'est juste, ça évoque pour moi, ça m'inspire. En fait, it inspires me to think further based on this small, minimal thing of the bench. About the Muppets, first of all, about the Muppets, to have this, yes, maps are actually kind of a difficult thing. The more detailed a map, the better. I sometimes use 3D or a picture for people to better imagine actually what the environment is. And what we also like to do is to take them out for a walk to have really the shared understanding. So it's not just something abstract, and it's something really like experienced also. And also some discussions can already happen. Maybe there's a local guide, maybe there's already something, a dynamic that is slowly started up. Yeah, then the idea of that sometimes people really say whatever and then they don't do it, or they don't really feel like it anymore. I agree. Yeah, this is sometimes a bit ideas and ideas and ideas, and it's a big list. And then, but that's also like my point. Like, okay, if you start from engagement as something to look at, that it's more interesting, because what do they really do? How do they really activate it? When it's actually, for me, these are really good tests, because okay, you might have like this bench maybe made of pallets, but do they really use this bench then from pallets, and is it really useful? And then it could evolve to something else. It can evolve to something permanent, or you know, when you really ask them to take action, what happens then? And it's yeah. My colleagues call it sometimes like prendre la température, see like what's really happening, and then to the question of scale, I think this is a really valid point. What we're developing now in our projects is a kind of a citizen toolbox in which people can add, if they have an urban issue, they can. This is under development, but they can, if they, for instance, have a problem with noise nuisances, there's noise in their street, they want to take action, they can add some sensors themselves and some visualizations themselves. And then the sensors are actually connected to the actuators, maybe some lamp that lights up or something, but the sensor data can also be recorded and be shown to the government, and so that it's a kind of a citizen science thing where actually it's coming out of the local, but it's also informing more government structures, and looking at really this hybrid model also in the interventions themselves, that we're actually informing the government in the same system. Is this clear? Or?
Donc, si j'ai bien compris, le Muppets, il permet de détecter des problématiques à une certaine échelle qui vont ensuite faire partie d'un ensemble avec des autres manières de diagnostiquer le territoire. C'est ça, par justement ce que tu disais en haut. Donc, nous,
in my experience, this idea of having a diagnostic and then the diagnostic ends, that this is not happening. So it is something that is continuous. That is, you know, even if there's a specialist that came, then the people on the ground are still actively looking, and it's not just it's all of them who are actually very looking, and it might be the service prévention, and these are really like 200 eyes on the street, and they are permanently talking, and so even the diagnosis is never finished. So all these tools are like only putting extra. And so what we did, for instance, with Muppet in Brussels, we did the work together with the Services Communaux, joining with Muppet 5, 6, 7 Services Communaux. We make a map. We made 3 Muppet maps. We combine them in one summary map, and then the summary map is shown to the citizens, and we are asking the citizens to actually see if what they read there is correct, and if they have other suggestions. So we are doing preparatory work with Services Communaux, who extends then to citizens, and to facilitate this dialogue, this more hybrid approach. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know. Is I understand well, because I don't know. Is only one project and you don't use it yet. You don't experimenting this project, because I don't see any picture with mapping in the street, for example.
Mapping in the street?
Or this project in the street, or I don't know. I see only this design and not the picture in action, no?
For instance, these were pictures of actions.
Yes, but only for one, not for everyone. Everyone is already in function.
Well, I have hundreds of pictures more, but we have a limited time.
Okay. Okay.
But it is a picture. I mean, it really happened. I can assure you, it really happened, and there were 190,000 whistles. So.
I want to know is you have many idea and you use only one project.
Well, I have interactive swings. I have musical swing. I have other interactive projects, but I show you those that I think are most closely related to a diagnosis and to the idea of, I had to make a selection and for me this idea, I think the projects that I showed are about this like governments versus citizen and shows. Sometimes in embryonic state, but show some opportunity of collaboration.
Okay, and what do you do to convoking the people to come in to do this?
Well, it's like the ludicness is a tactic to have to offer them something, offer them playfulness, offer them
like
a game, and if they win. If they won, then the local government paid for a party, a neighborhood party. There was some carrots.
Okay.
Dans le déroulé du jeu, à la fin, tu parles du risque, justement que c'est une étape importante. Est-ce que tu peux nous en dire un petit peu plus par rapport à ça? Justement, de voir pourquoi est-ce que, pour toi, ou en tout cas dans ce projet, peut-être que cette notion de risque, après toutes les informations que vous avez reçues, était structurante. En quoi est-ce qu'elle a modifié peut-être le projet, la manière de faire?
Je pense que it's when you this is about the Muppet, it's not really about this game, the Sparrow game, but in Muppet you see that sometimes people are too much consensus based. So they once they have a nice team dynamic, they don't want to break the team dynamic by being critical to what the team has produced. And in my experience, it can be sometimes really helpful to create these frictions and to sometimes play the devil's advocates. And you know, we are not the first. There's like this in this thing of 6 hats, where you have the green hat. There's also I don't know if somebody knows it, but there's also the black hat, the criticaster, the person who says that it really doesn't make any sense, and then everyone is actually triggered to think harder or to be more clear about some things. Because sometimes when in my experience, when for instance the bomb was placed, this helped everyone to articulate what actually the weaknesses, and then sometimes immediately solutions were created. Sometimes if you restrict people in to say, well, you can only come up with one option, but there are actually 2 options on the table, then you force people to find an option that is actually something that combines both and to think deeper. And I think in participatory processes, in diagnosis, we're often not thinking deep enough. And so all these tools can help to flesh out,
Oui, c'est plutôt une remarque comparative par rapport à la précédente intervention. Il me semble qu'il y a une dimension communautaire, c'est-à-dire de construire un collectif avant même de se poser la question de comment ça pourrait faire diagnostic. Moi, c'est l'impression que ça m'a donné la présentation que vous faites. Et en tout cas, pour moi, ça pose cette question que, a priori, le diagnostic, si on ne déconstruit pas l'ordre du politique dont il est vecteur, c'est-à-dire les collectifs qu'il impose de lui-même, les périmètres territoriaux, le domaine de compétences et les prérogatives, c'est-à-dire si on ne se pose pas la question de quels seraient les nouveaux collectifs légitimes, qu'est-ce qui leur ferait commun, et du coup, sur cette base-là, comment ils auraient des choses à partager, par quel jeu, par quel véhicule, ils pourraient produire quelque chose ensemble, il me semble qu'on rate une étape, qu'on grille une étape dans l'ordre du politique aujourd'hui. Donc il y a une dimension communautaire, je ne sais pas, en tout cas commune, bâtir du commun ou faire du commun, voilà, qui me semble assez essentiel aujourd'hui sur les questions diagnostiques. Ça peut marcher pour la palette, hein, t'inquiète pas. Hein.
C'est d'ailleurs ce qui est revendiqué par Patrick Bouchin. Enfin, il parle beaucoup de ça.
Mais par bien d'autres aussi.
Oui, oui, mais, non, mais parce qu'on en parlait tout à l'heure, alors je me suis dit que...
Il y avait des fétiches en architecture. Oui.
Ça fait résonance avec ce qu'on disait tout à l'heure. Je vais peut-être proposer à Thibaut, comme la thématique est assez proche, de venir... tu veux venir ici ?